And of course, what's nice with Nearpod, you can use this on a computer or on a handheld device. So, so nothing special. It's just it's a web-based app.
I'll deal with it.
You need some help, Missy. I'm happy to
Just
help
sit
you
with
down
Mary and
here.
kind of
Come
pay
down here.
No.
Now, this is today. I'm going to pay for this.
Yeah. I'm going to introduce them. And this is recording as well.
On your camera.
Side by side.
First, to Mary, Karen, thank you very much for coming. For those of you who have not met them yet, Karen Richardson teaches at Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts. Mary Henniger teaches at Illinois State University in Illinois. They actually have been working on similar things to TGFU since they were in did their doctoral work together.
Last year.
Last year, yeah, at the University of Massachusetts. So both of them did their doctoral work at the same time at the University of Massachusetts and started, I say, playing around with TGFU at that time, and have kind of continued with it for the past couple of years anyway. So we welcome both of you here today. Thank you very much for doing this. And
Here we go.
here we go.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to come here today to entertain us. Hopefully we'll entertain you some as well. It's an honor for us to be here at the University of Limerick and to have the opportunity to share our work with you. We were commenting last night that pretty much this next 25 minutes represents 14 years of work that we've been collaborating on. So I'm not sure exactly what that says, but you can figure that out later. I am Mary Henniger, and I am Associate Professor in the School of Kinesiology and Recreation at Illinois State University. I've served now for the last 6.5 years as the Physical Education Teacher Education Program Director, and I work in teaching both undergraduate and graduate classes, everything at the undergraduate level from methods to pedagogy, and also things like assessment and adapted physical education, and at the graduate level, things like curricular design, socio-cultural perspectives in physical education, and technology, use of technology in physical education. Today, we would like to share our ongoing journey toward understanding how students develop competence and decision-making skills through gameplay. We will discuss the theoretical underpinnings of our work, the research we have conducted, and some of the practical applications.
It is very, got us started. What I'd like to do is let's take a look at our Nearpod responses. So we just need to reduce that. And as she's getting that ready, again, the work that I do at Bridgewater State University, it is within a department of what we call Movement Arts, Health Promotion, and Leisure Studies. I have had the opportunity to teach a lot of pedagogy courses, as well as serve as the coordinator for our graduate studies in our department. So here's what you have to say. So, when we asked you, how do you define competence in gameplay, you can see a number of things that your classmates talk about. I see understanding movement and literacy, sort of you're confident the students are performing, knowing what to do in a game situation, and why you're doing it. Keep scrolling down there. So you can see all of your responses. We could also, we won't take the time right now, we could share that and all those responses will show up on your screen so you'll have a chance to sort of see that. But it strikes me that you have an interesting perspective on what competence means, and you will notice in our presentation today that we've spent a good deal of the last 14 years trying to figure out exactly how best to teach competence in gameplay to novice players. So with that, we'll get started. So first, a few guiding ideas that have shaped our work. First, it's important to understand what competence is and how it's defined. Competence refers to knowing what to do and when to do it within the context of complex games. With competence comes enjoyment, and with enjoyment comes persistence, which is required to become a better games player. Second, as light notes, complex games provide a good environment for students to learn pertinent information and to apply that learning in an authentic context. Third guiding idea is that in order for students to be able to apply their learning, it must be made explicit and conscious as discussed by Rink. In other words, it's up to the teacher to find ways to help students make knowledge, thinking, and understanding explicit. So, a little bit of our journey to understanding competence in gameplay. Our ongoing journey to understand how students develop competence as a way to become more skilled games players has been kind of a long and winding road. It's been informed for us by a variety of research perspectives and theories. It began through our exploration of the expert-novice research as a way to think about how expertise in gameplay is developed. The more we read about experts' understandings of thought processes during gameplay, and the more we focused our attention on how novices grew and developed as games players, then we focused our attention on how novices grew and developed as game players. And the reason for this focus is because this represents learners that we encounter in K-12 physical education. So as we progressed, we began to work to understand how novices develop knowledge to become more skilled games players, and we looked particularly at the development of what we call tactical decision-making competence. So we've continued this journey through constructivist learning theory, complexity thinking, video game design, and the use of game adaptations as a way to better understand how novices learn tactical decision-making. And as we work to explore ways that information can inform teacher education practices, teaching strategies, and the facilitation of student learning. So we're going to highlight some of these perspectives later in the presentation.
So we'll start with our first study. We did a qualitative study of novice volleyball players, where we looked at the development of tactical decision-making and knowledge. From our review of literature, we found that expert game players have increased tactical awareness and can attend to more complex features of the game. What we didn't know was what tactical decision-making skills and knowledge novices had that they could use during gameplay. What we found through our research was that novices, in fact, had a varying level of tactical knowledge and decision-making skills related to volleyball. So they weren't a blank slate. They weren't starting from scratch. And then we also found that despite the fact that they had this knowledge, and it was varying, as I mentioned before, what they had difficulty with was applying that knowledge to form solutions to tactical problems. Part of the reason that Karen and I have surmised that novices have this difficulty applying that knowledge is that it's often created in an artificial environment, separate from the game itself. In order to help students make their knowledge more explicit, and therefore more applicable during gameplay, teachers must learn to create learning environments that allow students to develop their tactical decision-making in developmentally appropriate game situations. In an effort to take what we learned from the volleyball study and make it into something that can be used by teachers and students in physical education classes, we looked at novices' development of tactical decision-making competence, or what we call TDC. As I mentioned before, competence is the ability to know what to do and when to do it during gameplay, and is developed primarily through the active engagement in modified game situations, along with targeted questioning and focusing by the teacher on students' cognitive understanding. TDC involves the development of the ability to attend to the key tactical features of a game while engaging in that game. The more tactical awareness a student has and can access, the better they are at gameplay. As students become better at attending to the appropriate game features, they begin to make better decisions about what to do and when, thus becoming better games players. In the article cited above, we proposed a framework for TDC, as well as a series of strategies to teach and assess TDC development in the authentic context of gameplay. This table represents the hierarchical TDC framework that we proposed. Data were collected to create this framework using a top-of-level protocol. Students engaged in 3-on-3 volleyball gameplay, and they were enrolled in a college-level beginner volleyball class, so rather a general physical education class that students could take who are not PE majors. So,
Yeah, so it will be something that you're probably not accustomed to here, because there are no such thing as general ed classes. So, when students come in their first and second years in college, they have often about 60 credits that they can take that are electives. And physical education is often one of those credits. And so these were people who would be non-PE majors who just decided, I want to learn to play volleyball, and they take a volleyball class.
correct. Thank you. So they're playing, these novice or beginner players are playing 3-on-3 volleyball, and every time that there's a rally, we stop them. And we have them come over and we audio recorded their responses to the following question. What were you thinking about during that rally? What were you thinking? Not that question. Their audio recorded responses were analyzed, and the themes identified ultimately became the 5 TDC levels. The TDC framework begins at level 1, which represents inattention to the game. And we've all seen that child worried about his or her lunch more than whether or not the game continues, right? At level 2, students begin to think about their own engagement in the game by focusing on themselves and their own skill execution. Level 3 represents a student's ability to attend to all of level 2, plus information about his or her teammates, things like their strengths and their weaknesses, their tendencies, and so forth. Level 4 occurs when a student consistently begins to attend to what is also going on with their opponents. Again, you might be thinking about things, tendencies that they have. In volleyball, who's the tall person that's always going to block the attempt that I have at a hit, where they're moving on the court, and so forth. Finally, at level 5, novice game players can attend to the game situation as well as all of the other factors described in the first 4 levels. Here, a student can take into account aspects of the game, such as the score, the time left to play, and the playing conditions. The TDC framework serves as much needed scaffolding that can be used by teachers and students to facilitate student development of tactical decision-making competency. The framework is useful in terms of helping teachers emphasize tactical decision-making during instruction by helping to focus attention on important aspects of gameplay. TDC gives teachers and students a vocabulary to think about and discuss tactics, thus helping to make tactical knowledge and application more explicit or conscious. In addition, the TDC framework provides some effective ways for teachers and peers to assess students' thinking during gameplay. This kind of formative assessment provides valuable educational opportunities for all learners to develop the tactical knowledge and skills necessary to become better games players. The next leg of our journey involved developing gameplay scenarios to help assess students' TDC. Through our study of tactical decision-making, we began to notice that some students were less able to think about tactical decision-making due, in part, to the quickness of the games played in physical education. Some students, when asked to discuss what they were thinking about, remember we stopped them after a rally, were unable to provide sophisticated answers. But it was not necessarily because they didn't have more complex knowledge about tactics, but rather because they didn't have time during the game to access and apply that information. As a result, we began to work on the development of gameplay scenarios to access and allow students time to apply their tactical knowledge and decision-making skills in a quote-unquote slowed down environment, thus allowing students to attend to more appropriate contextual variables than they could during the actual gameplay itself. We found that these scenarios can be useful tools if they provide enough information about the game context, player and team characteristics, and if students have the opportunity to respond to open-ended questions based on information provided. Student responses to scenarios provide more robust information about what students knew and how to apply it during gameplay by pointing out some of the variables that are often missed during that sped up gameplay time. So the next stage was that at Illinois State University, myself and my colleagues actually used the TDC framework to assess our own teacher candidates' tactical awareness. I won't go into it in much detail, but it was in a response to the need to demonstrate meeting certain standards for our program. We decided we would go this route. So what we did was we looked at our physical education teacher candidates, and so these are all pre-service teachers, and they are enrolled in mandatory pedagogical, how do you call it, pedagogical learning, pedagogical skills, classes, practice?
Practical modules.
Yeah. Okay, and so we collected data on their tactical awareness related to badminton, soccer, volleyball, and tennis. All right, so during these classes. Again, we used the Talk Aloud protocol. The peer would ask a peer, what were you thinking about? We audio recorded it, and then the faculty then determined what level of TDC the student was operating at any given moment. And I can certainly go into more detail about how we did that later if you'd like. All right, so we found that our teacher candidates possessed limited tactical awareness, and that it was something we needed to focus more attention on throughout the peak curriculum at Illinois State. It also became really evident from the findings that our candidates' skills and tactics were content specific. Therefore, it was important that we make sure that we assess them in a variety of game forms. And I think you'll see that kind of come across in the next table. So here's essentially what we found. So just for a second, let me step back and tell you that what we were trying to do was determine whether our students were competent movers. And in order to do that, we had two pieces. One was actual skill practice. All right, so we skill tested them. And the other piece was the tactical awareness. So what we looked at were the different activities, broke it down by male, female, and we looked at if a person was not considered competent, was it skill or was it tactics? And so this represents the percentage of students who were not competent because of their lack of tactical awareness. Okay? So you can see here, TDC scores, limited competence classification in various ways across games and game classifications. With invasion games, an average of 50% of the time that students were deemed not competent, it was because of TDC. With invasion games, with net wall games, 59% of the time a student was not competent because of their lack of tactical awareness. And remarkably, which is astounding because we spent a great deal of time on volleyball, volleyball was the one they had the least amount of tactical awareness about. So that's something for us to deal with later. But so this finding demonstrates that tactical awareness and competence is content specific.
Can you click for me?
Sure.
Oh, great. So the work that Mary and I were doing with TDC, it's wonderful, and it definitely serves as a foundation for understanding what novice players are thinking about during gameplay. But it doesn't resolve the challenge of allowing students that have a range of skills and experience levels to play good games together. Oftentimes with students in physical education, there's very big differences in their abilities and their interests. So again, I set out to try to figure out, how do we allow all students to have a good game together? So next I'm going to share a principle of game modification that my colleagues at Bridgewater State University and Mary and I have explored through our research and through our practice as teacher educators. It's called the principle of game modification through adaptation. And it's powerful what happens in gameplay when diversity in skill or experience creates a good game for all students. So one way to better understand the potential of games in physical education as a powerful site for learning is to take our cues from video game designers. Video game designers know that players must experience success to persist in gameplay. They must feel empowered to make decisions during gameplay, and they need to feel that the game has some relevance to the players' lives. In video games, problems are ordered from easy to more difficult to teach the players skills and understandings that lead to more complex challenges. Anyone in here a video game player? Any video gamers? A little bit? Okay. So this may or may not resonate with you as I talk through it. Players learn to play through a progression of sub-games known as sandboxes. Sandboxes exaggerate certain game problems and limit the options that players have, thus allowing them time to develop certain skills and to create a deeper understanding, allowing for more advanced play in later games. So basically, when you are in a video game and you have a problem, you can't get through something, you have a pause, and you stop and you practice and figure out why you can't get by whatever the challenge is. So that's called a sandbox. So adaptation games draw on the principle of game-based learning developed in video games. So adaptation games are modified versions of games, and they consist of a series of 3 to 5 short game encounters where the individual or the team remains consistent. So Mary and I will continue to play together, but the rules or the constraints of the game change after each game. Now, game constraints are what the student needs to know to play the game. So the game constraints are things like the space that you're going to play in, the scoring, the number of players, or the rules of the game. So those are the things that can be manipulated. Now, game constraints are set by the teacher to limit the options or challenges and to focus students' attention on a particular outcome. So when we think about in teaching games for understanding, there might be a particular tactic that you're trying to get students to practice and experience. So just like the video game programmer does with the sandbox concept, so this adaptation game is very similar to that practice space that the video game designer has. Now, a unique aspect of the adaptation game is that the student or team who was less successful in the previous game encounter. So Mary and I have just played a one-on-one badminton-like game. I lose. I'm the player who's down. I now make the decision to either make the next game we play easier for myself or harder for my opponent by choosing from the conditions that the teacher has provided for them. So it's entirely possible that the next time we play, Mary is going to have a smaller area that she has to score in. I'm going to still have the whole court. So that's what we mean by the player who is down now makes a decision to make the next game easier for myself or harder for my opponent. We play again. Feature design, thanks. So my colleagues and I did a study of pre-service teachers that explored game modification by adaptation by using complexity thinking as a theoretical frame for this work. In reviewing the research, we identified 3 qualities of a complex system. Adaptation, self-organizing, and emergence form critical elements that allow learning in games to occur in a nonlinear process. For this nonlinear process to happen in adaptation games, the conditions in the environment need to offer enabling constraints. And enabling constraints limit what the system can do so that it doesn't become overwhelmed, but at the same time offers an openness to the possibilities that the complex system can take advantage of. So therefore, the adaptation games were designed with constraints in such a way to scaffold learning at a rate that each player can manage the movement demands. In adaptation game, the role of the teacher is to provide the enabling constraints as guidelines for emergent engagement by students. So it orients the learner to what might happen in the game rather than what must happen. So here's what we found out from our research. And I'm just sharing just a small set of the findings here. But one of the major themes that we identified in this study was that of equalizing power. So we have 4 subcategories that support this. So first, leveling the playing field. So Alex said, I noticed in badminton that when some of the people who would normally dominate didn't necessarily dominate in the adaptation game. So it leveled the playing field in that way. A second category was choice to the underdog, challenge to the winner. Pre-service teachers identified that a unique characteristic of the adaptation game was that the student who didn't win had the power to make decisions about the constraints of the next game, which served to equalize a power dynamic between the winner and the loser. For some pre-service teachers who felt less secure in their ability to play certain games, the use of modification by adaptation gave a sense of empowerment. So if I'm used to always losing to Mary when we play badminton, with these adaptations, I feel more empowered that I want to play a game with Mary because we can still have a good game. Now, for the pre-service teachers who identified as highly skilled, changing the game constraints was viewed for them as affirmative action, and it wasn't for them. To them, the adaptation seemed unnecessary and only appropriate for the lower skilled opponents of unequal status, which as a teacher-educator was really a place of learning for us. The adaptation game equalized the power and tempered some of the childhood baggage or privilege that pre-service teachers brought to the game and really pushed them to be present in the moment of the game at hand. For the pre-service teachers who throughout their lifetime were accustomed to feeling powerful from games, this equalizing feature was unsettling, while the pre-service teachers who rarely experienced power during gameplay felt a renewed interest in playing that game. So think about how that might apply when you're working with secondary level students. Great. So study findings point to the critical role of the enabling constraints as an important aspect of adaptation games. It was a unique contribution of the changing enabling constraints that allowed for the flow of energy and a resultant gameplay action space. Results from the current study highlight how the appeal of the unpredictable nature of the adaptation game contributes to student engagement in gameplay. Disequilibrium created the conditions for learning to emerge by allowing the players to interact with each other as they tried to gain control of their changing roles in a series of subgames. Because the pre-service teachers experienced prolonged involvement in the games, they were able to utilize an approach to problem solving that included a trial and adapt process. Researchers have found that movement variability is an intrinsic feature in adaptive movement behavior, as it provides the flexibility required to consistently achieve a movement goal in a dynamic sport environment. So that's it for me. Mary, you're up.
So the last part of the journey at this point represents the most recent work we've been doing. And it's a practitioner-oriented article that just came out last summer that brings together the TDC framework that we talked about earlier and how it can be applied when students are engaged in adaptation games, so bringing the two big ideas together. We share with practitioners that the development of TDC occurs most effectively during well-designed games that allow all students to experience success, which can be facilitated through the use of adaptation games, as Karen just explained. Teachers, as game designers, can use the framework as they consider game constraints to modify and create adaptation games. Further, during instruction, they can focus students' attention on appropriate aspects of gameplay using the language and tools of the TDC framework. So, as we conclude this presentation, hopefully you've gained an insight into our ongoing attempts to understand how students develop competence and decision-making skills through gameplay. We hope that your insights and questions regarding our work will continue to propel us on our journey toward finding ways to make games meaningful and important learning spaces within the context of physical education. Thank you again for this opportunity to share our work that we are so passionate about, and we look forward to your thoughts and questions. Thank you.